rain fell in thin, cold lines over the narrow mountain path, beating against the rickety cart that carried her away from everything she had ever known. Her name was Mira, though in her village they had stopped calling her that long ago. To them, she was simply the useless one. She could not bear heavy loads like her brothers, could not plow the fields, and after the fever left her weak and trembling at 13, her father's patience had withered into disgust. When the trader came, a stranger with a grin too wide and coins that shone brighter than mercy, they didn't even look her in the eye as they sold her. "She eats more than she earns," her father said. "Take her, maybe the mountains can use her for something." The trader laughed. "Maybe the wolves will." Mira sat in silence as the wheels creaked, mud splashing against her bare feet. The world beyond the village was nothing but mist and shadow, and she wondered if this was what death looked like. Slow, quiet, and cold. She wanted to cry, but she'd already used all her tears in the years leading up to this moment. When the cart stopped at the base of the mountain, the trader grunted. "Out. He'll meet you here." "He?" she whispered. "The mountain man," the trader said. "Old, half-wild, lives alone up there, paid for you in silver. Don't know why, don't care." He tossed her a thin cloak and turned the cart around. Without another word, he disappeared down the path, leaving Mira standing alone in the rain. The mountain loomed before her, vast, ancient, and silent, like something that had been alive long before people ever learned how to name things. A crow called somewhere high above. Mira wrapped the cloak tighter and began to climb. The air grew colder, the path narrower. Every step was a battle between fear and the small ember of will that still burned somewhere inside her. She didn't know who this mountain man was. A hermit, a hunter, maybe worse. But whatever awaited her up there, it couldn't be. Worse than being sold for being worthless. After what felt like hours, she saw smoke curling from a cabin nestled between pines. A figure stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, his beard thick and streaked with gray. His eyes, sharp as flint, studied her for a long moment before he spoke. "You're smaller than I expected," he said. Mira lowered her gaze. "I'll work hard, sir, whatever you need." He nodded once. "Work, eat, learn, that's all I ask. You've got a name?" "Mira." He grunted approval. "I'm Jonas. You'll stay till spring. After that, if you've got the sense to survive, you can go wherever you wish." The cabin was warm inside, lit by a single fire. The walls were lined with tools. Axes, ropes, traps, maps of the mountain drawn in rough charcoal. Mira could feel strength in every object, every movement of the man who owned them. Jonas was not cruel, but neither was he gentle. He showed her how to chop kindling, how to start a fire with flint, how to melt snow for water. The first few days left her palms blistered and her body aching, but every time she wanted to give up, she remembered her father's words. Useless. She began waking earlier, staying up later. Jonas noticed, though he said little. Once, when she managed to split a log cleanly with a single swing, he muttered, "Good." That single word filled her with more warmth than the fire ever could. One evening, a storm howled through the mountain. The wind screamed like a living thing, rattling the shutters. Jonas went out to check the traps and didn't return for hours. Fear gnawed at her until she could bear it no longer. She wrapped herself in a fur cloak and pushed into the storm. Snow stung her eyes. The mountain was merciless, swallowing her footprints as fast as she made them. At last, she found him. Pinned beneath a fallen branch, leg twisted. Without hesitation, she grabbed the branch and tried to lift. It was heavy, but she didn't stop. She used stones, her shoulder, even the blunt edge of the axe, until finally the branch rolled free. Jonas gasped in pain, but managed a weak grin. "You came for me," he said. "You'd have come for me," she replied simply. It took them the whole night to make it back, dragging through the snow, the world a blur of wind and cold. But they made it. When Jonas awoke the next morning, leg bandaged and fire blazing, Mira was cooking porridge, something she'd learned just by watching. From that day, everything changed. Jonas began teaching her things he'd never shown anyone. How to track by prints, how to read clouds, how to move through the forest without breaking a twig. "The mountain doesn't reward strength," he told her. "It rewards patience, will, and heart." Weeks turned into months. Mira's hands grew calloused, her back stronger, her spirit fiercer. She learned the names of birds, the rhythm of the streams, the whisper of snow before it fell. The girl who had been sold for being useless had become someone the mountain itself seemed to respect. One dawn, as the first light touched the peaks, Jonas handed her a small carved token, a hawk in flight. "You've earned this," he said. "The mountain knows your worth. Maybe now you do too." Mira held the carving, tears stinging her eyes, not of sadness, but of something new, freedom. She looked down the slope where her old village lay beyond the mist. For the first time in her life, she felt no anger, no shame, only peace. Jonas nodded toward the rising sun. "The world called you useless, but the mountain knew better. Go on, show them." And with the strength of every hardship she had endured, Mira smiled. "I will." Spring poured down the mountains like melted gold. The snow that had caged the valleys for months slipped quietly into streams, and the world smelled of pine, smoke, and beginning again. Mira stood outside the cabin with her pack on her back, the hawk carving around her neck. Jonas's leg had healed, though he walked with a limp now. "You'll find the world hasn't changed much," he said, leaning on his staff. "But you have. Remember that when they try to make you small again." She smiled. "I will." The path down was the same one that had brought her here, half frozen and terrified, yet it felt entirely different beneath her boots. Every turn held a memory of struggle and learning. The cliff she'd climbed to gather herbs, the clearing where she'd built her first fire, alone, the place where she'd almost given up and had chosen instead to stand. By the time the roofs of her village appeared through the haze, the girl who had been sold had vanished. Only the mountain student remained. When Mira stepped into the square, heads turned. The same people who had watched her leave in silence now stared in disbelief. She no longer looked fragile or frightened. Her shoulders were straight, her skin touched by the high-altitude sun, and her eyes carried the steady calm of the forest. A child whispered, "That's her, the one they sold." An old woman dropped her bucket. Her father came out of the smithy, face streaked with soot. For a long moment neither spoke. Then he said, "We thought you were dead." "I was," she answered softly, "but the mountain gave me back to myself." He frowned, unsure whether to believe her. "You look different." "I am different." She reached into her pack and placed the hawk carving on the table outside the smithy. "You taught me to see value in iron and gold. The mountain taught me to see it in breath and effort. I came to trade, not to beg." Whispers rippled through the crowd. She unrolled a small bundle of pelts, herbs, and carved wood figurines, work precise and beautiful. "Jonas showed me how to make these," she said. "I'll trade them for grain, salt, tools, fair price." A merchant examined one of the carvings, running his thumb along the feathers of a wooden hawk. "This is fine work," he murmured. "I'll take 3. Coins clinked. Another man offered flour, a woman eggs. Soon a circle of people formed, bartering eagerly. Mira met every eye without flinching. For the first time, she was not being looked at. She was being seen. That evening, the village gathered around the fire pit for the spring feast. Children chased each other with laughter, while the elders muttered about omens. Mira sat apart at first, but when the headman called for someone to speak of gratitude, she rose. "I used to think worth was something others gave you," she began, her voice clear over the crackle of flame. "But it isn't. Worth is what you build stroke by stroke when no one's watching. They called me useless and I believed it, until the mountain taught me patience, strength, and silence. It showed me that even a broken branch can keep the fire alive." The crowd was still. Her father's eyes glistened. He stood slowly and walked to her. "I was wrong, Mira." His voice shook. "Forgive me." She placed her hand on his arm. "The mountain already has." At dawn, she prepared to leave again. The village offered her gifts, bread, rope, warm cloth, but she took only what she could carry. Her father followed her to the edge of the path. "Where will you go?" "Wherever someone's been told they're nothing," she said. "There's always another mountain to climb." The sun lifted over the peaks, spilling light across the valley. She turned once more to look at the place that had once been her prison and now was only part of her story. Then she began to walk, each step sure, each breath full. Far above, a hawk wheeled in the clear sky. She smiled. "I see you," she whispered. "I'm coming home." The year after Mira's return, the valley lived in uneasy peace. Her trade with the villagers had grown. Her carvings and herbs were known in towns farther down the river. Yet she always climbed back to the high ridges before dusk, to the cabin where Jonas still worked the land with his quiet strength. The mountain was her heart, and it whispered to her in the wind. Then, one summer, the whisper turned to warning. It began with smoke, a thin gray thread curling above the western forest where the dry pines met the sky. Mira smelled it before she saw it. "It's not cooking smoke," she said. Jonas nodded grimly. "Lightning strike, maybe. If the wind rises, it'll run straight to the village." By nightfall, the glow of fire painted the clouds red. Jonas's limp slowed him, but he followed as Mira gathered ropes, skins, buckets, and the small hand axe she had once used to learn strength. "We can't fight the mountain," he warned. "We can only guide those who fear it." "I learned from the mountain," she answered. "Now it's time to give back." They climbed down toward the village, ash already drifting through the trees like black snow. The people were shouting, packing carts, trying to flee. "The fire's coming," someone cried. "We'll lose everything." Mira's voice cut through the panic. "Listen to me. The river path is too narrow. You'll trap yourselves. Take the east ridge. There's a rock shelf there that the flames can't cross." The headman hesitated. "You're sure? I lived this mountain," she said. "Trust me." She led them up the ridge, shouting orders, organizing chains of water bearers and woodcutters to clear brush. For hours they worked against the wind. Sparks leapt overhead, smoke stung their eyes. When a burning branch crashed near a child, Mira threw herself across the gap, shielding the girl and beating out the flames with her cloak. "Keep moving," she shouted, coughing. "Don't stop until you see the rock face." Through the long night they fought, the world reduced to heat, noise, and will. Jonas's shout guided men hauling barrels from the stream. Women formed lines to wet blankets. Mira moved among them, tireless, a figure of ash and firelight. By dawn, the ridge held. The flames stopped at the bare stone where she had led them. The valley still burned below, but the people were safe. When the sun rose, the villagers stared at the blackened forest and then at her. Her hair was singed. Her hands blistered, yet her eyes were calm. "The mountain takes and gives," she said quietly. "Today it asked us to be brave." Days later, when the smoke finally cleared, they rebuilt together. Mira taught them to plant new saplings, to dig channels that would protect the soil. The same villagers who once had called her useless now followed her lead without question. Children ran beside her carrying buckets. Elders came to her for counsel. The mountain that had once been her exile had become her teacher, and now her home was everyone's again. One evening, Jonas sat outside the cabin watching the new green shoots pushing through the ash. "You did what I never could," he said. "You taught them the mountain's heart." Mira smiled. "You taught me first." He handed her a piece of wood half-carved. "A new hawk," he said, "but it should fly farther than the last." She finished it that night, shaping wings spread wide, and when morning came, she placed it at the highest point of the ridge overlooking both village and forest. "Let this remind us," she whispered, "that worth is proved not by what we keep, but by what we give when the fire comes." The wind lifted the smoke's last traces, and sunlight spilled across the land. In that light, Mira felt the same quiet strength she had found the day she first climbed the mountain. Only now it belonged to everyone.